Hi, this is Tim Meyer from Keep Yourself Relevant. Thanks for joining today. I want to cover in two parts a book that I recently read and I'm using to help me in my role as a project manager institute change across the organization. And the book was written by Tamsin Webster and it's Say What They Can't Unhear, the 9 principles of lasting change. And again, I'm going to do this in two parts. We'll go through principles 1 through 5 today, and my next video will be parts 6 through 9. So with that, let's get started. The first thing that you want to do is identify the group of each stakeholder that you are working with. There'll be 4 different groups. There'll be the actives, the true believers, and ideal supporters. You can think of DING. Every time you bring up the project, they get excited and want to help you with the project. The ambivalents, they're indecisive. You can think of BIZ or buzz. Indifferent, non-reaction, or neutral, and you hear silence. And then the antagonist, there's disagreement. You can think of clang. So those are the 4 groups that the stakeholders or people that you're helping, needing to help implement the change on the organization will fall into those 4 groups. And obviously, you want to get everybody migrated eventually to the actives or true believers. So the first principle is change isn't just an action, it's a reaction. What this principle means is people react to a change. You can't control change. And then you want to get the intrinsic motivation for the person to help you implement change. In other words, your approach can just as easily impede a change as inspire one. You want to make sure that you're aligning your actions with the reaction you want. Why does it matter? Trust and belief are the bedrock of change. Humans are widely attuned to intent. What's going to get in your way with this principle? Experience to be wary of persuasion. Reactance is when people resist a suggested change because they feel forced to make it. So you want to make sure that people are buying into your beliefs for the change and they don't feel forced. Putting it into practice, you control what you do in the interaction and how you choose to approach it. The next principle, every decision has a story. What this principle means is there's no such thing as a truly rational decision. The stories we tell ourselves also argue for or against a particular course of action. People will change an action only if the story supporting it changes. In other words, any action someone takes ends an internal argument about why doing so makes sense. If that story makes sense, the decision will too. Why it matters. Change, True arguments for change include only the action to take and the outcome it should produce, but also the assumptions or beliefs that create the logical connection between the two. So you want to make sure that your argument is sound. In other words, rather than all these words. What gets in the way? Usually the messages include only the action and the outcome, leaving out the information about why one leads to another. So you want to make sure that you're emphasizing the why, because that will help turn everyone's to your side. Putting that into practice. When crafting a case for change, go beyond simple explanation of or edict for what you want to have happen. Make it an actual case, an argument people would build themselves. So you want to make sure that everyone will come to the same conclusion from your information. The third principle, principles set patterns. What this means is when someone doesn't see the world your way, they can't see the value the way you do. And that's really important to keep in mind. Change is possible when you change your perspective to see the world their way. So you want to make sure that you understand where they're coming from and how this change will be implementing or impacting them. In other words, the actions that people agree with are based on beliefs they already have. To understand an action, understand the outlook that can explain it. Why does this matter? People's brains are too efficiency orientated to take time to invent new stories. The brain relies on pre-existing beliefs and principles to have a behavior. So we want to make sure that you're not having to make them think through and create a new belief, is another way to say this. What gets in the way? False consensus effect, that others share your worldview or core beliefs. So you want to make sure you understand their beliefs. We all want to do what we are used to. So you need to make sure you understand what they're currently doing so that you understand how this change will affect them. Putting this into practice, begin with what they already want and believe. Principle 4, identity is the greatest influencer. And this is really one that hits home with me. What this principle means is we are what we repeatedly do. We act in accordance with who we are. In other words, people align what they do with how they want to be seen as smart, capable, and good. They'll defend that desire as strongly as they will. Why it matters. Start from the perspective that the person is smart, capable, and good. See the situation their way. So you want to make sure you're looking at it from their perspective or understanding their perspective. What gets in the way? And I work in the information technology world, so just be aware of jargon and speak to people in terms they understand. So for me, I need to make sure we don't talk in our team doesn't talk in technical speak for technology words, and we talk in words that people can understand. People's identities are not monolithic. Putting into practice, seek to affirm the smart, capable, and good qualities of current practices and beliefs. And the last principle I want to cover today is the deepest beliefs are the hardest to shift. What this principle means is the more someone sees that their personal principles deliver on what they want, the more they see them as true. In other words, the longer someone's held a belief, the stronger it will be. Search for something even stronger than what's standing in the way. Why does it matter? Cognitive inertia, a person's innate tendency to cling to their beliefs, is one of the biggest challenges to change. So this will be a hard one to overcome. And what's getting in the way? When you're faced with strong opposition or deeply ingrained viewpoints, it can help to focus your aim on learning instead of winning. And then putting that into practice. Don't challenge beliefs, exchange them. Again, this is the first part of a two-part series on covering a book that will help you with organizational change. Say what you want. Say what they can't unhear. Thank you for listening today. And if you like this video, please consider subscribing. Thank you and have a good day. Bye.